Howdy folks, today's episode is going to boost your model's confidence and transform how they see themselves because we're diving into the world of empowering boudoir photography. Trust me, you're going to love this one. Welcome to Camera Shake, the show bringing you the insider scoop on everything photography and videography, giving you the edge you need to stay inspired and ahead of the game. I'm your host, Karsten Nuts, and before we jump in, I'm just asking you for a quick favor, real quick. Over 65% of our YouTube viewers and podcast listeners are not actually subscribed to the channel. It's unbelievable. But there's an easy way to fix that. Just hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second and it helps me it helps me keep bringing more amazing guests your way. Although I'm not really sure whether that's even still possible, but yeah, it's worth a try. Anyway, hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much. And that being said, well, buckle up because today's special guest is a true artist, capturing confidence and empowering his clients one portrait at a time. He's a musician, photographer, and the creative force behind art and boudoir. Please welcome the incredible Edi Roque. Eddie, man, how's it going?
Thanks, Karsten, for having me. Hello to your audience. I'm honored to be here, and I'm yours.
Fantastic. It's an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Like I said to you off air beforehand, I'm a big fan of your guitar playing, obviously, being a guitar player myself. It's always good to have a fellow, photographer stroke guitar player on the show. But today it's all about boudoir photography. Boudoir photography is sort of an interesting genre of photography. What exactly would you say, defines boudoir photography, and how is it distinct from, let's say something like artistic nude?
Usually, the reason it's called art and boudoir is because I've been doing fine art and fashion, commercial photography, even before I realized that the thing that I was doing, it could be called boudoir, right? I think the main difference is between shooting models, professional models, that they know how to pose, how to express, they're comfortable with the nudity itself, and shooting the everyday woman, right? I don't really like that term, the terminology, but that's kind of what differentiates fine art from boudoir. You're trying to create the same emotion, the same aspect of lighting and posing, but you're dealing with people that are very self-conscious about themselves, how they look. They're usually older. They're usually not in the shape that they wanted to be. So you have to overcome so many, the way they see themselves, right? So that's the biggest challenge. But the end result, it's pretty much the same. You can call boudoir fine art, at least the kind of images I do, the style that I shoot. I say that many times. I love natural light, but I'm a strobe guy, and there's no way to recreate some of those pictures without like off-camera flash. And a lot of boudoir guys, they like, it's a girl lingerie next to a window, take the shot. You can go wrong, but you don't have that punch. You don't have that control that you have knowing how to utilize off-camera flash. So people say that I have an editorial look to my boudoir images, and that's because of my work with fashion and commercial for as far as I can remember, which I still do right now behind the scenes, because boudoir is the company's name, is the studio, so I don't kind of promote that work, but I do. It balances, but it's almost like a half and half. My fashion commercial between the boudoir, which is the work with clients.
So what do you think makes boudoir photography particularly appealing or empowering even, to women compared to, other photographic styles? Let's say, traditional portrait photography, for example.
I believe that some women, as they age, they feel the need to capture a moment in time, and 90% of my clients, the only thing they have in common is the regret. I wish I have done that earlier because I was so pretty, I was so young, but there was a lot of preconcept and like family, friends, and society in general, and they still do, right? There's a lot of misconceptions about boudoir and what people think it is, and it has nothing to do with sexy pictures, it has nothing to do with nudity. So once the clients, they find my work and they see what I do and they approach, um, part of what we do is to educate, is to explain what does that mean. They can be fully clothed and still be considered boudoir because it's an emotional way to capture a portrait of somebody who's trying to overcome traumas from past relationships. They went through a surgery, so they have scars and they have to embrace that because that's the new body they have, or they lost weight, or they got married, they got a divorce, like many life-changing events that brings women to understand how important it is to celebrate that specific moment in their lives, and that's what we're here for.
It's really interesting. You mentioned that that it's not about nudity, because the one thing I found, when I was looking at your photography, is that you're really not afraid of the shadows. There's shadows can hide and suggest a lot of things without actually showing them. It's a little bit like, I mean, this is a pretty stupid comparison. It's a little bit like, when you watch Jaws, for example, and there's a lot of suggestion about the shark, but you don't actually ever see the shark until the very end, or until very late in the movie. And it's sort of, you're kind of relying on your mind's eye, in a sense, to kind of fill in the blanks in a way. And this is the thing I love about some of your shots is that actually a lot of those deep shadows are really more suggestive than depictive, or whatever the word is.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And the reason Jaws was the way it was, according to Spielberg, is because the shark itself was not a good prop. It was like there was no CGI at that time or AI or anything, so it's just like a puppet of some kind, and they didn't want to show because it would look so silly and so ridiculous. And that's the same with what I do, because one of my last clients, she was 69 years old, and as much as they want to celebrate, stretch marks and everything, there's a way to do it with art. So the shadows, they help me to sculpt and to shape the body, because you don't want to just highlight everything, right? It's a process of learning and seeing themselves and kind of connecting, falling in love with themselves, sometimes for the first time, sometimes looking at themselves under like an artistic lighting and an artistic eye for the first time also, because we're not wired to like pictures, right? As kids, you always have like the parents like smile for the camera, you don't want to smile. Kids usually they cry. We don't like to have our pictures taken, and we grow up with this sort of trauma. And at some point, they spend a lot of money to come here to meet a stranger, a male photographer, and to undress in front of that guy to have their pictures taken. That's just terrifying, right? So, as a side note, I've been shooting Canon for my whole life. I'm not an explorer of light, but here's my joke: I love light because that's how I create shadows. So I do like the low key, the from the Italian, the chiaroscuro kind of lighting, because it allows me to make things hidden, models that they have their issues. So to get to the higher key images, it's a therapy for them. So I usually start a little more like underexposed, a lot of shadows, and then we start to pose. Then as they see some of the images in the camera without filters, without photoshops, and they start to see themselves like, okay, I'm beautiful, and that confidence starts to grow. And then we can have a little more light, we can have poses that are a little more uh, revealing or risque, because this is for them. It's not to show on social media, it's not to post. Sometimes they want to do as a gift for like the partner, but it's basically it's for themselves. It's that daily reminder, they're worth, they're beautiful, and they have to celebrate and be proud of, it took a lifetime to get where they are right now. So that's kind of what we do.
It's a really interesting parallel to headshots. And actually, I'm just, before I get into that, I just want to clarify that, I'm in no way in no way comparing women to sharks, by the way. Just to clarify that. It was just the idea.
Of course.
The idea of telling a story without actually showing everything explicitly, that's the sort of thing. And you're right, actually, I remember reading about the actual prop in Jaws, which was terrible and malfunctioned several times or something. But it's one of these things. I mean, out of necessity, of course, it really almost like coined the psychological thriller in a sense. And how many times has that concept been copied is amazing. But the interesting parallel with building your client's confidence throughout the shoot, that's really interesting, because I've spoken about this, many times. That's exactly what happens during just, a typical headshot session, for example, where, the client comes in literally with the words, "I hate having my photo taken." And you go, all right, okay, well, that's our baseline. It's uphill from here.
Well, first, they fill up a questionnaire. So I have a bunch of questions regarding what they like about their bodies, if they have a partner, what the partner likes about their bodies, what they don't like, which is important for me because it's an area that I will like to work with, right? Since I don't like my legs, I don't like my back, I don't like my nose, and there's lighting, there's angles to capture everything, because if they come, they take nice shots and they leave the same way they came, I didn't do my job. My job is to see the things that they're self-conscious about and to present them a new way to see that, right? That's the transformation that we expect from every client. So based on the questionnaire, I know what kind of music they like. I know the favorite food, the favorite color, those, simple things. So when they come, I'm already I set up the space for them, right? From like the little snacks to the playlist. We have like curtains of different colors, a bed sheet, and everything. So everything is set for them. When I start my set, and I have my hair and makeup artist that stays the whole time here, because there's always like something to adjust, like a strap or a hair, retouch the makeup because they cry a lot. For obvious reasons, and every client's different. Some clients I start with like bad poses because it's very comfortable, they're just laying down, and it's kind of like a morning routine, like we're waking up, stretching, stand up. Sometimes I start with floor poses, or kneeling. Sometimes I do have a window, I just use a Fresnel outside because I don't have natural light directly coming into the space. And my other set doesn't even have a real window, it's just a fake window. So I do the window shots, I just light them differently. So I don't have a script because every client is different. I had clients come in here with like party dresses and robes and something from the partner, like a white shirt or like a football shirt. And I had clients coming with like a cape and they're naked under the cape. So there's no way to do a one size fits all because they're all on different moments in their lives, and they all want something different. Sometimes they all want the same because they want to push themselves as far as they can and see, that's the only opportunity I will have to do something like that. I think that's what they have in their minds. And once again, they're spending a lot of money. So I think the financial aspect, it's the pressure to perform, knowing that they're not models. They don't know how to pose. From simple things like what to do with my hands, where should I look at? Do I breathe in? Do I exhale? Right? So once they start to see I'm posing, I'm explaining to them like what we want to capture, what kind of images we're going to do first, and they start to see those first images coming in. That trust, it's built like really quick. I have my silly jokes that I do.
I was going to ask you this actually. Whether clients sort of review the images, as you're shooting, or do you shoot for a while, then you take them out and you show them some images? So how do you go through that process?
Also, no rules. Sometimes I would take the first shot and I will show them, because I'm here as a cheerleader as well, right? So, right. And sometimes I will shoot for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes to start showing something. It all depends. Sometimes not because of the pictures are not good. It's just because I feel that they are in the flow, and it's more important to keep shooting than break that momentum to show an image. So sometimes I feel it's important and I want to show to them, and sometimes I'm just shooting, because at the end of the session they will get to see the pictures anyway, right? I do the review session right after the session because I want them to see the images without color grading and Photoshop and anything, because otherwise I haven't done my job. Again, they need to look pretty and beautiful, and they have to love those images straight off the camera.
What are the most sort of common misconceptions that people have about boudoir photography?
Sexy pictures, and that creates something weird. I don't complain a lot, but coming from the fashion and commercial, and because I don't promote that anymore, sometimes I'm working with models, and there's that kind of like, oh, you should boudoir. And you go on social media and you see all these models posting things that are extremely risque per se, but because it's labeled as fashion or glam, they kind of get away with it. And if you post something that it's a lot less explicit, but you say it's boudoir, people look with a different eye. So there's a little bit of hypocrisy around it. But that's that's part of the job. So what happens with the misconceptions, it's because there's a lot of people that they're not just professional photographers to start with, and it's just a shortcut to take pictures of women for many different reasons, right? Which is not my case. I've been doing this for as far as I can remember, and I was doing boudoir, and I had the same preconcept. I don't want to call myself a boudoir photographer because I don't have anybody to look up to. Because in fashion, I had Peter Lindbergh, Richard Avedon, and all the greats. And in boudoir, I never had that photographer to get inspired by. So I had to look back to Lindbergh as a boudoir photographer, because the work he did, to me, was boudoir, because he was showing strong, confident, powerful women. It's beyond what you wear, right? Because fashion is not about selling clothes, like he said. And photography, it's bigger than fashion. So the work I do, it's inspired by the fashion, the editorial work of the great photographers that I grew up looking at their work. And that's what I try to get inspired by.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. The empowerment thing is actually, again, that's a super interesting topic. I mean, how do you define, capturing confidence, for example, in your during your shoots or in your sessions?
Confidence comes from showing in the pictures, because a selfie one, you take 20 selfies trying to find the angle, trying to find the light, and you can only go so far with your arm. So you will never get a good proportion of your body if you're trying to go for like a full body or even just like a medium shot. And it's about the lighting. Everybody can look beautiful under the right lighting. And it's not the camera, it's not the lens, right? All of these things, they help. But confidence, in my case, it's showing them a picture that could be a still from a movie, or it could be a picture that could be a cover of a magazine. And when they look at that, they're like, oh my God. So once they see themselves from my perspective, they understand that whatever they see in the mirror, because here's the problem, right? You wake up in the morning, sometimes you're already late for work. So you go to the bathroom, you look at the mirror, that face, after sometimes you don't have a good night of sleep. So that's how you see yourself for the first time in the day, right? And you try to get ready, you leave your house, and that's the impression you have, like, oh, I look like that, I look terrible. But that's not how the world sees us. So the problem is that we only have this perspective of how we look. And when you look in the mirror or when you take a selfie, that's not the real representation of how we look for the world. Even though photography, it's not a three-dimensional thing, you can create a lot more depth in the image when you're lighting properly. So once they see that, it shifts, it changes their perspective. And it's important to show the images behind the camera on the screen, because they know there's no Photoshop, there's no filter, there's nothing to, that's how they look. That's exactly how they look. So that creates that sense of confidence. Like, I've been looking at myself through the mirror my whole life, and no, but I look like this, not like that, right?
It's a really interesting thing. I remember some years ago, when my oldest stepdaughter was a teenager still, they had a thing at her high school, and it was all about, it was like a range of talks, and it was all about self-perception, body image, and because especially teenagers at a certain age start to really worry about the way they look, and the way that they think the world perceives them. And there's an awesome example of so they had an FBI artist, like a sketch artist, one of these sketch artists that draw usually criminals, from the description of like an eyewitness, let's say. And so they had a group of people, and they would sit behind a screen, so the FBI artist couldn't see them, and they would describe themselves. right? And so he would create a drawing based on their own description of themselves behind the screen. Then, so, he would do that with every single person in that group. Then it would basically pair these people up, put them in a room together in pairs for an hour or so. And they would have a conversation with each other. They would get to know each other, talk to each other, have a chat. And then after that, they would call them back behind the screen, and they would now describe the person that they've just been talking to for an hour. And so in the end, that FBI artist ended up with 2 drawings of each person. One, which was that person describing themselves, so the self-perception bit. And then the other drawing as they had been described by the other person. And it was remarkable how different those drawings were. It was unbelievable how your own perception of yourself really plays tricks on you. Like, for instance, the way that people describe themselves, when they would describe like, the shape of the nose. It's, my nose is a bit too big, and, my ears are not, level, and like, my left, I have lazy eye, all that kind of stuff. And then when the other person would describe them, it would be like, they have really beautiful eyes, and I really love their lips, and, the shape of the nose is really cute, la, la, la. And so it just, then when you saw these 2 drawings side by side, you all of a sudden realize how much more, in a sense, how much more negative or how much more skewed your own perception of yourself is, and how it's completely different from the way that the rest of the world sees you. And I think photography has that magical power because it's so, in a sense, it's so neutral and just, the camera just, whatever is there, that's what it is. To an extent, of course, we could do things with lighting, whatever, but ultimately, that is what it is. This is, that's sort of that. I think that's the beauty in that. I also wonder, though, whether AI will have an impact on it. What's your? I mean, this is kind of sort of like a side question to the whole boudoir thing. But what's your what's your impression of the impact that AI will have on portraiture, things like boudoir, the way that we can, in other words, will the ability that we can change our appearance in a picture, will that have an impact on the way that we see ourselves?
Well, it's happening, right? The thing with technology is, and I was talking with another photographer one of these days, the reason why I love music and guitar in particular, you have a Les Paul from the 1950s, and you get one today, and it's the same, right? And I wish cameras were like that. Right? I wish we weren't trapped into updates, upgrades, and all of those things. I've been shooting with the F1 that's how I started. And it took me a whole life to go to the 5D. And now I'm shooting mirrorless. And technology only moves one direction, right? I see AI it's here to stay. I'm not afraid of. I don't utilize it. And I don't think it will ever replace a photographer, because 90% of photography of a session, it can be a portrait, it can be a headshot, it can be boudoir. It's the relationship with the subject. So AI won't have that. My clients will never be happy to create fake images of themselves, as good as they might look, because right deep inside they know that they don't look that way. And that's not empowering, because they're not sharing those images. So why would you lie to yourself and end up with a beautiful picture that it doesn't translate to real life? So when they're here, they know that whatever is happening in camera is how they look. So
It's actually a really good point. I mean, yeah, why would they? Exactly. That's exactly the whole, because the reason why they're there is because I'm assuming, because of the because it's not because of the challenge. I'm trying to find the right word, but because you're overcoming your own fear in a sense,
Yes.
and then modifying the image in that way later on makes absolutely zero sense. And you're absolutely right. I hadn't thought of it in that way, but you're totally right.
Yes. And I do have clients that in the end they love the images, but like, I'm not ready to see that scar. Can you remove it? Oh, I have this tattoo, but I would like to have that removed because it's, it's something from my past that I don't want to have like in the album forever. So of course I do the retouching and the editing because I want the clients to be happy, but that's their decision. And it's not because there's something they don't like about the process, about the work. It's just, it's emotional, right? So some
Yeah.
scars are a good reminder that we survived things that, hurt us in some way. Sometimes it's not. It's just something that you don't want to be in a picture.
Yeah.
So go
And I can
please.
absolutely. I mean, again, I can totally understand that. It's not too different in portraiture or in, especially in headshot photography. There are certain things that at the request of the client, I would tone down. Scar's a really good example. Things. I've had one client. She was very self-conscious about the different size of her eyes. Like one eye was ever so slightly larger, but it was such a such a good-looking woman that if you looked at it, you would have never noticed. I mean, honestly, you would have never noticed. I didn't notice that until she pointed it out. But it was really important to her. So, of course, I can do what I can do, and change that because ultimately she needs to be, happy with that image. That's kind of the most important thing. And it's not like a creative decision that I've made, but that's something that was important to the client. So yeah, I mean, it's not. Tattoos are a good example, actually. Yeah, you mentioned that.
Yeah, we at the end of the day we're providing a service, right? As beautiful as it is, as emotional as an experience it is for them, in the end they will be looking at those images and they have to be happy. So if they want to enhance or um, add it a little bit, I don't see a problem with that. But those are not my decisions, right? If of course, if it's a pimple, it's a bruise, things that are temporary, they don't have to be in a picture that will last for many many years. But other things, I always ask them if they would like to address something or leave it as it is.
I mean, I'm guessing that when people come in, in the beginning, they might be a little bit anxious and nervous. How do you help them to get over that initially?
Um, Once they're sitting, they have in hair and makeup. I have two hair and makeup artists, and they are just the best you can have. And I'm setting the room, setting the lights, and having a quick talk to them just to create that sense of uh, confidence and get to know me a little more if they didn't up to that point. But I leave the girls. It's important to have the girl talk. So uh, I it, I don't do much to make them feel comfortable. That's my hair and makeup artist, that they kind of put them at easy, and they get to start really feeling excited, because especially for older women, um, they're not. It's not like the younger generation that sometimes girls, they wake up and they do makeup to go to school or to go to work. They're driving their cars and doing makeup, especially here in LA. You will see that a lot. Older women, they don't have that routine. So the first time a woman will have their hair and makeup done by a professional was for the wedding day. And that's why the wedding became such a big deal for women at some point. So once they're here and that's happening, they start to feel like cared loved, pampered. So that already works towards the emotional aspect of like, it's like a spa day, but in the end, you're getting some pictures to remember this day for many, many years to come. So I don't force interactions. I don't try to create like a persona or a character. I'm just myself. We talk things that are important. I direct them and I guide them through the poses. I like to see the kind of outfits they brought because that will help me to see the kind of lightings, and sometimes I have to change colors for like the bed sheets and that kind of stuff. But I don't really, not consciously, I don't try to talk to them in a way to make them comfortable. I think that has to happen naturally, right? And of course, we always have like little chocolate. We have like some drinks and some things. I don't serve alcohol because I don't have a license to do that. But we do have a bunch of things here that it's just the environment, I think, helps them to feel like, okay, I'm ready for this. They're still nervous, they're still anxious, but it takes two shots. Once they get in the room and they see out the design and the lightings and everything, it's like for them entering like a movie set, like a dream of some sort. So that also helps, right? If you just have like a bed sheet and a, a window,
Yeah.
I don't think that will make them more comfortable, right? But once you have everything prepared for the session, and they know that all of our attention that day, that time, it's for them only. That helps to feel special. I think everything it's about feeling special.
How long is a session typically?
It takes in average 3 to 4 hours, 1 hour and a half for hair and makeup, and 1 hour and a half, 2 hours for the photography itself.
And you know what I always find interesting is to learn what a photographer's sort of initial process is. And you mentioned, you have a questionnaire and things. Do you do like a pre-shoot consultation, for example? Do your clients have an opportunity to? I mean, do they know you already when they first show up, or how does that sort of process work in your studio?
Well, many times they find me because of social media or my website. There's a bunch of videos. I have a small YouTube channel that sometimes I do BTS and just work with models. I never post anything with clients because that's for them. But I do a lot of model work with Boudoir just for marketing and promotional purposes. Once they reach out, we have a phone call. Not all of them. Sometimes they already know what they want. Sometimes they're being referred by other clients and friends. Quick talk. I like to know the reasons they're doing. So I'm getting married, or like I did a divorce session for a client, which was hilarious and beautiful, because I think it's important, right? Some women they come and they say like, I feel like I'm invisible. I'm walking on the streets and I don't exist, and they want to be seen as a person, and that's very important for them to have a reason to do it. I don't think anybody wakes up one day and like, I think I should do a boudoir session. There's a reason for that. That's the first thing I ask. In the questionnaire, it's a little more deep, like what kind of images you're looking for. Like you want to try like some implied nudity, or just like topless, or just like a lingerie, or you want to cover up. I let them choose the level of shots they're comfortable with. They all want to try to go as far as they can. Doesn't mean that's going to happen in the session, right? But I see that they have that as an opportunity to capture something in an environment where they are safe, they being respected, and they know that those images are not going anywhere. So that's kind of how it goes. But I do like to talk to them quickly, but sometimes they're just ready. They seen enough, they learn enough, and many times they will show up, and that will be the first time that we get to see each other and talk to each other.
What's the sort of pre-planning process like for a shoot? I mean, the questionnaire, obviously that's really important. It sounds like because it gives you a really good measure as to like how far that particular client wants to go, but also do you plan lighting setups in advance, or how much preparation, how much prep goes into a shoot before the client actually turns up? Let's say other than the questionnaire itself.
Not much, because I need to see them, and sometimes they share like a little, in case of clients, right? They send a little selfie, because sometimes I ask, like, send me a picture because I need to send this to my makeup artist, so we know, like, depending on what kind of hairstyle you want, it's helpful to see beforehand, like how long is your hair, the colors and everything. But not everybody does that, right? I'm an overthinker, so my emails, they're usually super long. I have a PDF. I did a book, which is a guide, so they know what to wear, what to bring if you want to buy some new stuff, because it's very helpful when you wear something for the first time. You already feel good, rather than, let me bring my old lingerie that I used for 10 years. So I try to prepare and educate them to be ready for the session, but I don't prepare myself, because I know the lighting that I would do. I know the poses I would do, but I need to see them, because I need to see how tall, how wide, how they look, and everything, because it just helps me to be more creative than having just like something. Of course, my ambient light and everything that I have for the session, it's preset per se. But some people I would choose. I love to shoot at f8, f11. That's something unusual for boudoir. People love the 1.2 lenses. I do have them, but they don't give the look that I want to capture, right? Because I'm shooting fashion, I'm shooting glam with known models. I want to make them feel like models. It will be easy to shoot at 1.2 ambient light and blurry everything, but that's not my style. That's not what I do. But sometimes I will go to like f4, 2.8 maybe. But it depends on how they look, how I feel they look. Like you'd say, sometimes one eye it's bigger, sometimes the nose is a little crooked. In your case, it's harder if you're working with like front light. But for me, I can light and make things more even. So I need to see them instead of just having my key light is on this side and their nose it's crooked to the other side, and it won't look that flattering. So I like to see them in person. And because it takes 1 hour and a half for hair and makeup, it's the time that I need to fine tune my lighting and adjust my space.
Yeah, that's actually, again, that's a really interesting thing in terms of lighting. Actually, let's talk lighting. Do you have like a go-to lighting setup, or how do you approach lighting in general?
I love the Fresnels. So I have the Fresnel attachments to my strobes. I do have the Airy, the Richardson, the tungsten ones. Eventually, I use them, but they're just too big, too hot, and too bright. So some clients, they're very sensitive to light. So that's why I use strobes, because I think that I get the lighting and it's just a little pop. It's not that scary. But if you're working with like a constant light and a Fresnel and you have to point that at that face, it gets uncomfortable over time. But I love the Fresnels. I love hard light. So if I'm not using a Fresnel, I will use just like a zoom reflector, bare bulb. I will use barn doors a lot. I have some opticals nudes. Sometimes we want to do like some of the wall shots and simulate the window, even though I have a real window with the shapes you want to control or get different shapes. I love to do that. Floor shots, specifically, I use the snoots a lot. But if you ask me for one lighting, one modifier, it would be the Fresnel.
Actually, it's funny you mentioned Fresnels because only this morning I've been looking at different Fresnels. I don't own one, but I've recently been thinking about getting one. Any advice on what to get?
I'm not sponsored by anybody, but there's some the aperture. It's a very cost effective one. They have a 10-inch one. They have an 8-inch one. I have a few of them for my backlights. I have one that it's 10-inch that I use as a main light sometimes. But it all depends. If you want a constant, get just like a small airy 1K or 2K. If you want to light the face, you can go as low as like a 650. You don't need all that power unless you have a way to control the intensity of the light. But if you shoot strobes, I think the aperture is a really good one. You can attach grids, barn doors, gels, and everything, and it's super affordable.
Fantastic. If I can find the link, I will put the link in the description for anybody who's interested.
I can send you the link later.
Oh, perfect. There you go. Awesome. Yeah, because I'm putting a shoot together, which is kind of based more on like, the classic Hollywood look, the classic black and white Hollywood look. So I know I need to get hold of some Fresnels, but I just haven't got a lot of experience with those. So, any advice on that?
It can be a mix of Fresnels and the Magnum reflector, right? Because they will very often use that as well, right? And barn doors for like hair light and ring light.
Yeah, so exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like that's it. That was exactly what was playing in my mind. It's like, okay, well, I'd love to try a Fresnel, especially for to light up the face and create things in the background, and I've got some ideas for like barn doors and hairlights and stuff. So the ideas are coming together. But yeah. So just as you mentioned Fresnels, I realized, well, actually, only this morning I was looking at different options. So why not ask the expert, as they say?
Yeah.
Now, your other passion in life is music, and I've also checked out your music, your guitar YouTube channel, which is awesome for anybody. Because this is the thing, right? I can't even tell you how many guests I've had on the show who also, who basically share the love of photography with the love of music. It seems to be an absolutely like a common theme, and just looking at former guests on the Camera Shake podcast, I mean, we could put several bands together. Just like unbelievable.
You should.
I mentioned it to a few people.
Yeah, it's art, right? My mother is an art teacher, so I was raised with arts, and my father used to play piano, so that's where it came from. Like everything in my life happened because of music, even photography, right? Because I start working with bands and artists, and I start shooting album covers, promo kit, press releases, and that kind of stuff, and it developed from there, right? Because I started really, really early in my life, and music, I'm grateful because everything I have in my life, it's because of music. That's why I came from Sao Paulo to LA in 2015, 10 years now. And that's how I met my wife. That's how I got to develop photography and cinematography. And I was kind of in between those two things because somebody put in my mind, oh, you can only do one thing, right? But very few people know Ansel Adams. He was a great piano player. My favorite artist, Bryan Adams, the rock star.
Great photographer.
He's a great fashion photographer. Lenny Kravitz, it's a great photographer. So some people think I'm a musician taking pictures. Some people think I'm a photographer making music, and I couldn't be one thing or the other. I need both, like outlets to express myself.
Incidentally, there are many examples. Some more known than others, like Andy Summers from The Police, for example, fantastic photographer. And Jeff Bridges. In the acting world, we have a lot of photographers. Would really, his stuff is very interesting. Actually, I'd love to have Jeff Bridges on the show. If you're Jeff Bridges' agent and you're out there and you're listening, make it happen. But I had his brother Beau Bridges was in the movie, and I had the movie's director on the show. I remember. That was interesting. It's a movie called Camera. Very interesting, a very cool movie actually about a little kid who starts taking pictures. Well, it's a kid who starts taking pictures with an old Mamiya camera that doesn't work, and so he basically takes a picture and then draws the picture as he thinks it would have turned out, until he meets one of an older character. Who then fixed up the camera and so on and so forth. Long story, great movie, highly recommend. It's called Camera.
I would definitely look that up.
Yeah, it's fun, it's entertaining, it's actually really cool. I like it. Also, film cameras, big fan.
Awesome.
The thing about music and photography is, I made that transition myself. Actually, I used to be a session musician here in London, and then I went into a professional photography. And it's funny because when I grew up in Germany, when I go back to Germany, I meet some of my old high school friends, whatever. There's often that sort of curiosity, and I can't really quite grasp how you can make that career jump from music to photography. And I remember the first time somebody asked me that, I couldn't really quite compute that, because to me it's kind of the same thing in a weird way, It's a creative thing. You start with nothing, you end up with something. You go through a process. That's like recording. That's like writing and recording a song. It's exactly the same thing. Start with nothing, then you have an idea. You do a few things. Further down the line, you have a finished thing. Awesome. And photography is kind of the same thing. And so, in a sense, so is filmmaking and virtually any artistic pursuit. So I never really, or for a long time, I couldn't really quite understand how people can't really see the connection.
And it doesn't mean you have to do one thing or the other, right?
Exactly.
It's all connected. I have a jazz duo with my wife, and we just did a session to shoot the pictures for the next single, right? So it's all, especially nowadays, that a musician has to be their own agent, their own marketing, their own PR and everything, their label, the producer, the engineer. Right? Like, you cannot just do music. You have to do so many things in order to be able to be a musician. And same with photography, pretty much, right? Like,
absolutely. Or podcasting, as a matter of fact, exact same thing.
Right. So I don't think you have to choose between one thing or the other. Right. And it's seasonal. Sometimes I'm doing more music than photography. Sometimes we're doing more photography than music. In photography, sometimes it's a lot of commercial. Sometimes it's a lot of boudoir. And it goes hand in hand. And sometimes you make the decision. Should I, take a break on this and like spend a little more time to finish a project? Like right now I'm doing a photography book. It takes a lot of time to put that together, because I have the body of work I have and the things I want to show from like years ago. Chronologically, it's been almost a year just curating images, right? And then stuff that I'm doing right now, and I'm like, oh, but this should be there as well. So sometimes I need to take breaks just to be able to finish some of the projects, because you can be overwhelmed, but it doesn't mean that you have to quit on something to do something else, right?
And often it's, with creative projects or creative pursuits, it's, it's a little bit like language. It's like forever in development. It's always changing. And you might start a process with one end goal in mind, and as you go through the process, I mean, it's like writing a song or recording a song. This is the thing. I mean, how many times? I mean, as a session musician, how many times did I, start a session in the studio with one idea, and then by the time it's all said and done, and it's ready mastered, it had gone off in a completely different direction. And I tell you what, the thing that I always loved about that creative process was, I always loved collaborating with others. Because especially to me, especially in music, what would happen would be, let's say I'd have an idea, then you start collaborating with other brains. And once you've had 3, 4, 5, 6 people contribute to that idea, put it in the blender, mash it all up. What you get as an end result is almost always much better than anything you could have thought of yourself. And it's to me, I've always been really interested in seeing that process happen, and because you can never really 100% exactly know what the end result is, which is why I've always been a collaborator. That's always been the fun thing. I've never been like the kind of, I don't know, solo writer where you have an idea and you go like, right, you play this, you play that, you play this is your part. And, I could hear the full song in my head, before we started recording. I've never really been interested in that because I always wanted to see where it could potentially end up, And, I have similar experience in photography, which is again, why I love collaborating, with other photographers or with other creatives in general, because you never really know what's gonna happen.
Yeah. You start with a vision, right? But the end result, it's based on everyone else involved. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, and it's total chaos theory as well. Like you just don't know, what's gonna happen. I mean, it's a little bit like, this is what I love. Like, I don't think I've ever written a guitar solo. I'm pretty sure. Well, and maybe I did once or twice, but that's just never been my approach. In the studio, it's always been like, okay, when it was like, okay, now we're going to record the solo. We've got, I don't know, 8 bars, 16 bars, whatever it may be. And it was always like, all right, go, hit record. We'll just see what we get. And then we sort of build it up from there. And I don't think I've ever played the same solo twice live, ever. Because why? Like,
Yeah. It's a language, right? Like it goes both ways. When you have people relying on you and you have, to perform, it depends on you're getting hired to do something or you're just being creative and doing something for yourself. Like I've done 5 instrumental albums by now, and many times people are relying on you, so you have to be the guy writing the drum parts and the keyboards and everything. I love what people bring to the table and contribute. I've been working with Kenny Aronoff since I got here, and he's the kind of drummer that whatever I write as an idea and a demo, he will like verbatim make charts based on that. And I was like, no, I want you to be creative, not just copy whatever I've done, because this is just a suggestion, right? So I learned that I have to do a lot more than what I would like to in order to get things done, working with certain musicians. But some people that are just so creative and so free, per se, that you can loosen up a little bit, right? But it's important to me to be able to do both things, right? To write the arrangement fully and just deliver the charts and let's get this going, especially when you're renting a studio, which gets expensive and you want to nail things in 1 or 2 takes. But I also love to just get in the room with an idea and jam until something magical happens, right? It's not very common nowadays, but I love when that happens.
Do you think that your love for music has in any way sort of influenced your photographic style? I'm saying that because, I've looked at some of your, especially your black and white shots, and they're very often, they often remind me of some traditional jazz shots almost.
Mhm.
Is that something that you've been influenced by?
Yes, yes. Once again, growing up with vinyl, and I was not able to buy my own music, so I had to rely on whatever was available to me as a kid. Um, I was 4 or 5 years old when I started playing piano because of my father, right? So I was exposed to music in such an early age, and vinyls back in the day, it was big, especially if you compare to a 5-year-old boy.
Yeah.
So it was huge, and you will open that, and there was like pictures, there was like so much information, and sometimes they will have like a studio shots, like a BTS, and
Yeah.
it was just magical for me, right? So if you go from like Billie Holiday to like Etta James and all of those, Charlie Parker, I love those images because it sells that jazz club idea, and it's very close to the Hollywood lighting, right? There's a lot of Fresnel, a lot of top-down lighting, and it's hard light. So I grew up with that feeling, the Joe Contrain
Yeah.
with the saxophone and that top-down light. And when I start working with musicians, that's what I had in my mind. That's what a album cover or a promo kit should look like, right? So, and I started working professionally in the early 90s. And at that point, fashion and music was so connected, because you will remember George Michael, like with the supermodels, right? You have a music video with like Cindy Crawford, Naomi, Michael Jackson, like all of these pop artists, they were so connected to the fashion, right? Even music videos in photography studios, like the white background and all that stuff. So it was a huge impact in me, not just in the black and white, but the connection between fashion and music. It's something that I never got over. To this day, I think we're missing that big time right now.
Yeah, it was fashion. It was fashion, music, and photography, and of course, video. Then, when MTV came along, it was it became the moving picture at the same as well. So all of these, in a sense, all of these visual art forms really came together with with auditory art forms like music, to kind of create a whole. And as you say, because I remember when I was a kid, I grew up with vinyls at the time. Although CDs were like popular, I went through my dad's record collection, and you pull out some records, and the thing that made you put on that record was simply the artwork on the cover.
Yeah.
Because you look at the cover and you go, "Whoa, this looks awesome." I remember putting out a Stanley Clarke album. This is actually the thing. So my dad was pretty much into like rock music and Hendrix and stuff, stuff like that, which was great. Being 6 or 7 and playing, starting to play the guitar and whatever. But I remember pulling out a Stanley Clarke album, and the only reason I put it on was because it was Stanley Clarke in front of a brick wall with lots of graffiti on it. I'm thinking like, whoa, that's a freaking awesome picture. I wonder what that is. I put it on, and it funked my little brain out of my skull. It was unbelievable. And that completely shaped everything really, my style of guitar playing, the kind of music I was into, the stuff that I eventually ended up recording, all the rest of it. And it was really all based on a photo, actually.
I read an interview a few weeks ago. Some of those bands in the 80s, people get offended if you say hair metal, but the hard rock bands, some of those bands, they got signed because of a good picture.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Labels will look like, oh, this can sell. Let's get those guys, because they will make money, anyways, right? So it's that important, right? And nowadays it's kind of, we're so overwhelmed with everything. And it's really hard to filter the things that they have a deeper meaning, or like something more than the superficial ways
But
of like, this is just a picture or just a song.
yeah.
So
The interesting thing was, I remember when grunge came along, all of that started to shift, because all of a sudden, like, then, things became more, in a sense, a lot more arty and a lot more creative. Because I'm thinking, like, album sleeves and all the rest, all of the, the artwork connected with that. To me, it was like, whoa, okay, now this is a completely different, it's almost like, artistic overload. All the stuff that's going on, like shapes and textures and, colors and everything, was like, it was all, to me, it was all connected. And of course, the music was so different at the time. Um, and of course, MTV was at the height of its popularity at that
yeah,
point.
yeah.
So now that influence went into filmmaking, because music videos all of a sudden became a lot more elaborate and a lot more moody, and the lighting really changed. And to me, it was just like, it was an auditory and a visual like attack on my senses, I remember at the time. And
Yeah.
and so again, to me, I was completely, totally influenced, not only by the music but also by all the visuals around it. So it's really no surprise that now, decades later, I'm still working in the same field, music, photography, video, whatever it may be. To me, it makes no difference. And yeah, and so, coming back to the earlier part of the conversation, I still don't really understand why some people seem to have such a problem with, with not seeing the similarities. But there you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's art. It's the same thing, right?
Exactly.
At least for us, you change the outlet or the medium, but the expression is right there, and it's the same thing. And sound and color, they're just part of like a frequency spectrum that, some you can hear, some you can see, but they're all connected. There's colors to notes,
Yeah. Well, exactly.
sound to colors.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, what made you? As you mentioned earlier, you started out in like in fashion photography. What made you take that step from fashion photography into boudoir? What was the thing that made you transition?
um, Shooting models, and sometimes they will ask like, "Oh, can we do some pictures instead of me selling clothes or selling jewelry, or you know, do something more personal, something where I can really be myself." And I start doing that, and I start to get people calling me like, "Oh, you shot my friend, and I'm not a model, but I would like to have some. I seen some of the portraits and things you've done, and I would like to have something similar for me." And I started doing that behind the scenes, right, without knowing that that was boudoir. To me, it was just a way to have women to, um, undress the mask, not
Right.
the clothes, and like just be yourself. I was working with the lighting because I was doing a lot of fine art at that time. Um, there's something on my website, but not too much. I try to be kind of respectful. But anyway, I start doing that by request, and shooting these people. And the more I was doing the models, the more I was having friends calling, and they were not models. And I I understood quickly the difference between somebody who's not a model, and the challenge, and the joy, the transformation, and somebody who is, they use their bodies to make a living, to sell products, to sell clothing. And per society, they have the perfect body, right? They're lean, they're tall, everything fits and looks nice. Designers, they make clothes based on those body types, and sometimes they don't feel good, about themselves, right? And I got this kind of contrast between like shooting somebody who's clearly overweight and older and it's so happy and it's having such a good time in doing that, and a model that, once again, per society they look perfect but they feel miserable. And it became sometimes hard to work with models because they also have the same struggles and the same uh, issues like we all have, right? But until that point, I never had to deal with the emotional aspect, uh, because you get to a shoot, you have like the assistants, you have like the set designer, you have, there's a crew, right? You don't get to interact with everybody as much as you do when you're like with 2 3 people. um, and sometimes the models, they will have a hard time because they just don't feel good, they don't feel they look pretty, and it doesn't matter what you tell them, right? And I start to go more into the boudoir because it was just the opposite to me. We will have people just like happy and crying and super excited about those pictures. And at that point, I didn't even have hair and makeup, right? It was just they will show up, they will do their own makeup, and we will just shoot. So it was a 101 thing, and it was so intense and it was so um, powerful, right? Emotionally. And I start to kind of, I don't want to do fashion anymore. So I kind of rebrand, I shift. I love fashion, I love commercial work, but I feel like that I can contribute a lot more to society doing boudoir because the women that I worked with and I still do, um, I see the transformation. I see how they come when they arrive, and I see the way they leave the session. I see the way they come weeks later when they come to pick up, when they want to pick up their albums or their products. Sometimes they want to ship to them. But when I see those clients after the session, it's a different person. And it's like inspiring, and I wish every woman will consider to do that. Find a serious photographer. It doesn't matter if it's a male, female, whatever pronouns or genders are out there. Just do it because it can be life changing.
What advice would you offer to photographers who, are trying to, build up their clients' confidence, through whether it's portraiture or boudoir photography per se?
I will quote Peter Lindbergh. I think he says something that was fantastic. Uh, he say his job is to fall in love with the model from 9 to 5, and then he will go home, right? So it's just find beauty in everyone. I think you cannot capture beauty if you don't see the beauty, right? And it's as simple as that. And with that said, it's a challenge to take pictures of my own wife because she doesn't like it. And you have such an intimacy that you don't work in a way that you would do with a client or with a model, right? But it's just finding beauty, and the beauty that comes from inside. I know that that's like, kind of cheesy, but it's true. It doesn't matter how they look if they're not feeling in a moment, if they're not present, if they're scared or uncomfortable. You will see it's in the eyes, right? So I always get them to, that's why I need to learn what food they like. If they have a pet, what's the name, or favorite color, fruit. and 9 out of 10 women, they love sushi, right? So I'm taking the pictures, and I cannot, um, I have to provoke them. I have to create the emotion that I want to capture, right? So many times we're shooting, and I know they're hungry because it takes a lot of energy to do what we do. And I say things like, okay, let's think about that sushi, whatever. And you see the eyes glowing, and you see like all the things that you want to capture. So you need to provoke some emotion. You need to provoke something to get the reaction, right? And that's where the daddy jokes they come from. That's well, like knowing the if they have a puppy or a pet. The partner doesn't matter, because when you mention the partner, most of them, they're so in that moment that they're like, they don't want to hear about it, which is funny. But it's a matter of interacting 100% of the time, right? And once you get them in that moment, and they can be thinking about, okay, now you're in Disneyland with Justin Bieber. Doesn't matter. There's a reaction to that. Whatever you tell them, there's a reaction that comes back at you. So if you want to capture, and sometimes you say something silly and they will like, that's also an emotion. What I don't do is pose them like a statue, and like, now you don't breathe, now you don't blink, and now I take the picture, because that's lifeless. So I'm always capturing movement. I'm always focusing in the breathing, because it's important for them. Sometimes they forget to breathe, right? And you need to like just doing the little, I call the yoga, because it's pretty much what it is. Once you get the body in the pose you want, your work is right here. You need to capture that emotion. And they don't know. They might be thinking about like a water bill, a tax. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? You have to create those little stories, those emotions, right? They're in a place they've never been before. They're in front of camera, so you need to feed them with little stories, so they can shift the mind in whatever they're concerned about, and that's direction. And you can look at those pictures like, whoa, this is very, very sexy, and out there thinking it's sushi. That, to me, that's the secret.
Fantastic. Eddie, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. What's next for you? What have you got coming up?
uh same old, bunch of clients, still curating my book. No idea when it's coming out, but it will happen eventually. A new album with the duo of my wife, so finishing up a few things, and lots of commercial work. I'm shooting for a Pilates studio here in LA. It's a chain, so there's a lot of work that is coming from that, which is very interesting, because I'm doing my, they they say Calvin Klein style, right? They like the kind of images that I shoot, and the kind of I lighting things, but I don't usually do fitness and sports, that kind of thing. Done before, but I don't do that anymore. So the reason I got this campaign is because I had the creative freedom to kind of like, I think if we do this way and approach in this direction, I think he will stand out, because everybody's doing the same thing, right? And that's part of being creative, and being like having an artistic eye over everything, not just going with the flow. So that's what it's happening in my world right now. Just staying creative and working a lot. And once again, thank you so much for having me. I hope your audience got something positive out of it. I certainly did. And hope to be back soon.
Fantastic. Edi, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. And of course, just, everybody listening and watching, be reminded that all the links to Edi's website and social media are going to be in the description, no matter whether you're listening to the audio version or watching this on YouTube. Edi, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being our guest on the Camera Shake podcast this week.
Thank you for having me, Karsten. And thank you all for listening, watching, and hope to be back soon.
All right, folks, that's a wrap for today's episode. Massive thanks to Edi Roque for sharing so many insights and inspiring stories with us. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't miss episode 193 with Ben Markham for more boudoir photography goodness. If you love what we're doing, then consider supporting the podcast at buymeacoffee.com/camerashake. It truly helps us keep bringing awesome guests straight to your ears. And if you're turning in via audio, don't forget there's a video version over on YouTube. Just search for Camera Shake Podcast to see the full experience over there. Thanks again for hanging out today. And remember, new episodes drop every Thursday, so make sure you mark that in your calendars, your diaries, whatever you kids use these days. Until next time, keep shaking things up. See you next week.